Hello and a very warm welcome to a brand new edition of World Panorama with me, Frank Pereira, on Rajya Sabha television. Over the next half an hour, we'll bring you a roundup of all the significant events to have happened around the world this week. But first, a look at the headlines. South China Sea tensions in the news again, with reports of China placing missile launchers on one of the several disputed islands in the region. US calls it blatant and illegal militarization. China terms it justified self-defense. British Prime Minister achieves a landmark deal with the EU for special status and greater autonomy for his country in the 28-member grouping. He'll take this deal to the British people for a Brexit referendum. Turkey refuses to stop airstrikes against Kurdish groups in northern Syria despite pressure from its NATO ally, the United States. Cracks emerge in the decision by world powers on cessation of hostilities there, though humanitarian relief efforts do take off. And signals of Afghanistan still on the boil. The war-racked nation faced a record number of civilian casualties in 2015, says a UN report. Peace talks with the Taliban struggle to get off the ground. Our top focus on the show this week. South China Sea tensions are on the boil again. The US and Taiwan say there is evidence of China placing missile launchers on one of the disputed islands in the area in the last week. What they term clear signs of blatant and illegal militarization. China is claiming waters and islands in the South China Sea has created a strong flashpoint in the area, and the latest flare-up comes even as the US president stressed on the need to reduce tensions on this front. Here's more.
Satellite images of Woody Island in the South China Sea showing a battery of surface-to-air missiles, escalating fresh tensions in a region mired in maritime disputes between neighbors. China insists it is doing no wrong, calling measures it has taken merely defensive.
The limited and necessary self-defense facilities that China has built on the islands and reefs stationed by Chinese personnel is consistent to self-preservation and self-protection that China is entitled to under international law. So there should be no question about that.
Woody Island is part of the Parasols chain in the north. They, the Spratlys further south, and other islands have been under Chinese control, but are also claimed as per geographical location by Taiwan, Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia and Brunei. Though uninhabited, the islands are said to be rich in natural gas and oil reserves. Perhaps more crucially, some $5 trillion of world trade is done through the choppy South China Seas in which they are located. China sees US intervention to push for rights for countries along the South China Sea's rim as outright interference and creating regional tensions.
The United States is not the country that is involved in South China Sea issue. They should speak and act cautiously on the issue. They should support the relevant countries to resolve disputes through peaceful negotiations rather than taking advantage of this setting to hype the South China Sea issue, exaggerate the regional tension and alienate the relations among the regional countries.
The timing was ironic indeed, coinciding almost to the day with the US-ASEAN summit that brought together claimants of those South China Sea islands with the US that has attacked what it calls Chinese hegemony, with definite signals that it's in no mood to back out either.
We discussed the need for tangible steps in the South China Sea to lower tensions, including a halt to further reclamation, new construction, and militarization of disputed areas. Freedom of navigation must be upheld, and lawful commerce should not be impeded. I reiterated that the United States will continue to fly, sail, and operate wherever international law allows, and we will support the right of all countries to do the same. We will continue to help our allies and partners strengthen their maritime capabilities, and we discussed how any disputes between claimants in the region must be resolved peacefully through legal means, such as the upcoming arbitration ruling under the UN Convention of the Law of the Seas. which the parties are obligated to respect and abide by.
In October last year and again last month, the US had sent in warships and bombers to within 10 nautical miles of these islands in a show of defiance against China's claims. Now missile deployment by China is set to take that push and pull to a new level. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television.
Well, joining me for a chat to talk about this is Professor B.R. Deepak, Center for Chinese and Southeast Asia Studies, JNU. Welcome and thank you for joining me on the program. You know, the maritime disputes in the South China Sea have been going on for a long time now, and this is just one of those several incidents that have taken place over the last few years. You know, like the report suggested, there was an issue in October, there was an issue all through the year last year as well, and it seems like it's going to continue as well. Are we going to see any solution? Is there a solution in sight to this problem?
I don't think there is any solution, at least in near term. I don't see that. Why I'm saying that? Because we have to see the dominant perceptions which we have prevailing in South China Sea. One is the U.S. perception, which is vouching for the freedom of navigation and overflight, as President Obama has clearly said in his reaction. And another is the Chinese perception, how they see South China Sea. But here, which is now being flashed all over across the world, is the problem of deploying missiles, yes. Hongqi 9 or HQ 9, Red Flag 9. The surface-to-air missiles, as well as the defense missile defense system. But I think, as it has been told by the director of the South China Sea Studies in Beijing, Professor Wu Shi, this recent statement, he says that perhaps the world, they do not know, and what President Xi Jinping is trying to say, that the areas under our jurisdiction, that is Xisha, or they call it the Budi Island in US, yes. or Yongxingtao, in China. So this is under Chinese jurisdiction. And if we go back a little, in 2012, a city called, Xisha city has been established in this island, yes. Which of course is not inhabited by the huge population, just 1,000 plus people, mostly the military personnel are there. And it's a prefecture level city, under Hainan province. So China is saying that this is our city, and the
we are allowed to do
whatever we want to do. And this is not for the first time we are deploying the missiles. We have J-11 there, for yes. so many years. But why the hue and cry? And as far as dispute in South China Sea is concerned, especially the Nansha, that is the Spratly Island, that is the bone of contention between various countries,
yes.
And,
yes.
and Vietnam. It holds almost 29 islands, the huge chunk there, and others like Brunei, Malaysia, and other countries. So they including Taiwan, so they have yes. a little bit here and there. It is this pledge China is saying that we will not militarize this region, which as a matter of fact is not under their jurisdiction.
Indeed, indeed.
Yeah, so that's what they are trying to convince the world, that you have to see it through our perception. And U.S. being a non-party to the dispute, it should not,
that's what I wanted to talk to you about. China has repeatedly been saying that U.S. is not a party there, and U.S. is far away and should not be interfering with what's happening in the region. Does China have a point there?
I think to some extent, yes, because U.S. is a non-party, and for example, President Barack Obama, he is emphasizing that all the parties in the region, they should abide by UN clause, the Sea of Law. But whereas U.S. itself is not the signatory of this UN convention, the Sea of Law.
Yes.
So that is why China believes that here U.S. has the double standards.
Indeed.
Yes.
What makes, Professor, what makes the South China Sea so important? Why is it that everyone is vying for the waters of the South China Sea?
There are various reasons. One, of course, it abounds huge natural resources, especially petroleum and gas. So it is estimated billions of barrels are underneath South China Sea, and also trillions of cubic feet gas is underneath. So this is one, natural resources. Apart from that, fisheries. Apart from that, the tourism which China is promoting. So one is this, and I think even more important is the trade, the flow of trade, sea lanes of communication. As revealed by your report, $5 trillion of trade. It is moving through South China Sea, and that is why US is emphasizing the freedom of navigation in the open seas. It says that it doesn't belong to anyone. So that's why they are saying that we have the right to reconnaissance, as well as see that the rule of the law prevails in South China Sea. But China sees this slightly from different angle, because China believes that the pivot to Asia of the US, by way of which 6 of United States aircraft carriers would be deployed in the Pacific. So that is a huge threat China perceives. And secondly, China believes that the US is following the double standard, because as far as the reclamation activities in the South China Seas are concerned, so they are only pointing fingers to China, whereas all other parties, including Vietnam and Philippines, they are also reclaiming islands, because there are more than 700 islands in this region.
So the law should apply to everyone, is what
that's what China says.
Yes. All right, Professor, we'll have to leave to that. Thank you so much for joining us on the program and putting things into perspective for us. Well, on that note, of course, we'll slip into a short break now, but still to come. 28 killed in a car bomb in Ankara. Turkey says it will not stop bombing Kurdish bases in Syria despite a call to cease hostilities. We'll have that and much more on the other side. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching Rajya Sabha Television. Well, Britain got the deal it wanted from the European Union at the EU summit, a package of measures aimed at convincing Britishers not to exit the 28-member grouping. British Prime Minister had gone to the summit seeking greater autonomy for his country in the European Union ahead of a referendum among the British public on staying in the EU. Here's a report.
Intensive bilateral meetings, pitching his demands at multilateral fora, seeking a deal that would convince the British public to stay in the EU. Giving in to British Prime Minister David Cameron's demands came to a great extent from an eagerness among member countries to keep the UK within the grouping, to prevent an EU already troubled with the migrants issue and more from breaking down further. After hiccups galore, Cameron finally did go home apparently satisfied that he had something he could sell to his people.
We have just achieved a deal which strengthens Britain's special status in the European Union. It is a legally binding and irreversible decision by all 28 leaders.
The new deal includes an emergency break on migrant workers' in-work benefits that will apply for 7 years, less than the 13 years Cameron had proposed, but longer than other countries had asked for. Cuts in child benefits for the children of EU migrants living overseas, applicable immediately for new arrivals and from 2020 for the 34,000 existing claimants. Second, requirement for ever closer union with the EU do not apply to the United Kingdom, meaning Britain can never be forced into political integration. And thirdly, the UK can enact an emergency safeguard to protect the City of London, to stop British firms being forced to locate into Europe, and to ensure British businesses do not face discrimination for being outside the Eurozone. Britons have wanted a less intrusive EU and greater autonomy for Britain within the Union. Cameron hopes the deal he secured will win them over.
I believe the changes that we've secured as a country fulfil the objectives I set out in our manifesto at the last election. And I think they do create a more flexible Europe, more of a live and let live arrangement that recognises that one size does not fit all. But of course there's still more to do. And I'm the first to say that there are still many ways in which this organisation needs to improve. The task of reforming Europe does not end with today's agreement. Far from it.
Back home in the UK, this is just the beginning. Britain's relationship with the EU has huge resonance among its residents. The public votes in a Brexit referendum likely in June, and the real test lies there. The political opposition and even elements within Cameron's own Conservative Party keep up a loud anti-EU clamour.
The deal that he's done does not address the fundamental issues that British people care about. It does not address the issue that our Parliament is not able to overrule bad EU law.
I'm very, very confident about our country to be an independent country. I think we could do brilliantly outside the EU. We'd be looking internationally. The EU is a shrinking market. It's a failed project. The euro is not even doing particularly well. We would be so much better trading, looking to our links with the Commonwealth, getting control of our borders back, getting control of our democracy back.
So its special status to the UK within the EU, the British Prime Minister has got what he wanted from the European grouping. But the final verdict rests with the British people, and convincing them of the benefits of staying within the 28-member union remains a long haul yet. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television.
Well, decisions on cessation of hostilities in Syria reached last week hit roadblocks this week as Turkey refused to stop shelling targeted at Kurdish militia in northern Syria. Turkish warplanes left for North Syria to bomb Kurdish targets through the week. Turkey considers the Kurdish group YPG a terrorist organization, causing friction with NATO ally Washington, which backs the group in the fight against Islamic State in Syria. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan blamed the YPG's political wing for Wednesday's deadly bombing in Ankara that killed 28 people as the country gets sucked into the Syrian conflict. Signals of deepening divisions have emerged between NATO allies over policy in Syria. On the positive side, vast amounts of humanitarian relief and aid material has started pouring into besieged and devastated areas of Syria. 35 trucks carrying humanitarian goods entered the besieged area of Maudamia al-Sham in the suburbs of Damascus, besides reports of entry elsewhere too. The UNHCR said there was some progress, but much more needs to be done. Well, here are some other big stories that made headlines across the world this week in our segment Globe Watch.
President Obama this week signed into law new expanded sanctions on North Korea over its nuclear program. The sanctions look to cut off money to North Korea for development of miniaturized nuclear warheads and entail freezing of assets of anyone doing business related to North Korea's nuclear or weapons program or involved in human rights abuses. The sanctions also allow for $50 million to support humanitarian programs and transmit radio broadcast into North Korea. China has said some of the measures could cripple North Korea's economy. At least 28 people were killed and dozens injured as a car bomb went off in Turkish capital Ankara on Wednesday. The explosion occurred during evening rush hour in the heart of the capital in an area close to Parliament and Armed Forces headquarters and lodgings. The Turkish military said buses carrying military personnel were targeted while waiting at traffic lights at an intersection. Kurdish rebels, the Islamic State group, and a leftist extremist group have carried out attacks in the country over the last year. Australian police seized $700 million worth of the drug ice from a shipment of silicone bra inserts and art supplies on Tuesday. Officers found more than 720 liters of the lethally addictive drug methamphetamine in a series of raids. This goes down as one of the biggest drug seizures in Australian history. 4 people have been charged over the haul. A police official said searches have been going on since December. Former UN Secretary General Boutros Ghali passed away in Cairo on Tuesday, days after he was admitted to hospital with a broken pelvis. He was 93. Boutros Ghali had taken office in 1992 at a time of growing influence for the UN, following its decisive role in the Gulf War, serving one 5-year term. However, he faced criticism for the UN's failure to stop the 1994 genocide in Rwanda. Washington was angered by his opposition to NATO's bombing campaign in Bosnia.
Well, moving on now, Afghanistan had more than 11,000 civilian casualties in 2015, the highest since actual numbers were first compiled in 2009. That's the finding of a report prepared by the United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan in coordination with the UN Human Rights Office. A Taliban resurgence with the end of the NATO combat mission and influx of militants from Pakistan has taken the situation in the war-racked nation to new lows. Here's more.
$11,002 Afghans, civilians, non-combatants, have died or were injured in 2015. This figure surpasses by 4% the same figure for 2014.
An unending saga of suicide attacks and blasts in and around capital Kabul. The battle for Kunduz, the attack on a hospital trauma center that killed dozens. Taliban offensive in Helmand, Dishu, Bagram and beyond up in flames. 3 major centers of fighting in Afghanistan over the last year. Besides the security forces, the common man bore the brunt too. The UN's annual report unveils stark numbers that have only got worse every year since 2009. 11,002 civilian casualties, including deaths and injuries, were reported in 2015. That is up 4% from 2014. 1 in 10 was a woman, 1 in 4 was a child. Women casualties increased 37%, while child casualties increased by 14% over 2014. Ground engagements between parties to the conflict caused the highest number of total civilian casualties, including fatalities and injuries. IEDs are at number 2 on the culprit list, followed by suicides and complex attacks. Anti-government elements continue to cause the most harm, 62% of all civilian casualties. Pro-government forces caused 17% of the civilian deaths and injuries. Close to 14 years it's been since the US invaded Afghanistan after the 9/11 terror attack. And though NATO forces have ended their official mission, peace seems a distant cry yet.
We recognize that all the parties to the conflict have agreed on the need to avoid civilian casualties. But what we need to see are those same parties going beyond public statements to change the way they conduct the war. What I want to do is next year, when we release our report for 2016, to be able to report to you that there has been a significant drop in civilian casualties.
As a US-backed 4-nation peace process, including China, Pakistan and Afghanistan, struggles to get underway, stubborn hurdles persist. The Taliban continues to state preconditions, rejecting direct talks with the Afghan government. Issues like complete withdrawal of foreign troops and removal of Taliban leaders' names from a US list of rewards continue to be posers. It's a desperate hunt for a solution.
We are confident that the process would lead to a significant reduction in violence. The QCG's call on the Taliban groups to enter into early talks with the Afghan government without precondition is a reiteration of a strong message by the international community for peace talks in order to find a basis for enduring political settlement in Afghanistan.
Afghanistan's eastern border with Pakistan remains an area of concern. Anti-terror operations by Pakistan in their own country pushes militants to Afghanistan here. Victories by the Afghan army are temporary ones. Like the many other factors holding back peace in Afghanistan, it's an uphill battle, yet. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, let's shift focus now to the world of sports and bring you some big news from sports arenas around the world in our segment Sports Action.
Sri Lanka's skipper Lasith Malinga, who missed the New Zealand series due to injury, has been named as the skipper of the 15-man squad announced for the upcoming Asia Cup and the World T20 in India. Besides Malinga, vice-captain Angelo Matthews has recovered from groin injury and will feature in both the events alongside veteran left-arm spinner Rangana Herath and seamer Nuwan Kulasekara. Sri Lanka, however, dumped rookie seamer Kasun Rajatha despite his good display against India. Manchester United produced another underwhelming display as they lost to Danish side FC Midtjylland in the first leg of their Europa League last 32 tie. United were without a number of injured players including Wayne Rooney and lost David De Gea in the warm-up. They took the lead through Memphis Depay's shot, but Sergio Romero, who stepped in for De Gea, was unable to prevent Pione Sisto equalising. United's Jesse Lingard hit the bar before Paul Onuachu struck the winner. Former Real Madrid manager Rafael Benitez has expressed his desire to make a comeback to the Premier League, saying that it will always remain a priority. The 55-year-old led Liverpool for 6 successful years before he was sacked by Real Madrid after just 7 months in charge. Talking about his return, Benitez insisted that he was fond of the league and wanted to be on the field again. Benitez, who was sacked due to Madrid's slump in form in La Liga, was immediately replaced by the B-team manager Zinedine Zidane. Philippine boxer Manny Pacquiao has apologized in the face of severe criticism for saying homosexuals were worse than animals. Pacquiao said he remained against gay marriages but was not condemning the LGBT community. Pacquiao's original remark made during a TV interview drew ire from gay Filipino celebrities and rights groups and sparked heated discussions. Initially, he appeared unrepentant but later apologized, having received a lot of flack.
And finally, the biggest stars of the silver screen lit up the red carpet at the BAFTA Awards, the last major awards ceremony ahead of the Oscars. Survival drama The Revenant was the big winner at the BAFTAs this time, taking the Best Film Prize and Best Actor Prize among others. I'll leave you today with some glimpses of the event and I'll see you again next time.